So probably a lot of you guys haven't heard of me, and I can understand that because I am not a famous person. And the fact that I'm here makes me feel good, but I really know why I'm here. And the reason I'm here is because I know someone that can give you good advice. And so they felt like if I knew that guy, then maybe I could do the same thing. I'm probably not quite as good, but today, and today only, on BYU's campus, we are going to give you the insights, importance, entrepreneurial activity. Our guest speaker today, Michael Scott from The Office. Okay.
And now,
here we go.
Without further ado, I present the Regional Manager of Dunder Mifflin Scranton, Michael Scott.
Hello, everyone. I am Michael Scott.
Hello, I'm Brandon Hidalgo, CEO of the Teaching Company.
And I'd like to start today by inspiring you. May I borrow someone's textbook, please? Thank you. What have we here? Ooh, economics. Very, very interesting. You cannot learn from books. Replace these pages with life lessons, and then you will have a book that is worth its weight in gold. I know these are expensive, but the lesson is priceless. Good. All right. I think you're inspired. Shall we proceed? There are 4 kinds of business: tourism, food service, railroads, and sales, and hospitals / manufacturing, and air travel. So, you want to start a business. How do you start? What do you need? Well, first of all, you need a building. And secondly, you need supply. You need something to sell. Now, this could be anything. It could be a thingamajig, or a whoozy-whatsy, or a whatchamacallit. Now, you need to sell those in order to have a payday. And if you sell enough of them, you will make a 100 grand. Satisfied?
All right. Easy, Dan. Don't hurt anybody. See, anybody get hurt yet? I think that corner over there, Dan. Oh, yeah. The camera guy is a little nervous. All right. It's a brave group, as every time Danny throws them, half of you are going, no, no. Hopefully, no. Anybody get hurt? You might want to file your accident report with the center, and they'll take care of you. Now, actually, appreciate the advice. You know, there are 4, 5, maybe 6 businesses. And I'll tell you about another one that I got involved in and had the opportunity to get involved in being an entrepreneur. And I was drafted actually. I am not a natural entrepreneur. I got drafted into that phase because I was an attorney and practiced for 25 years. And I had a client, and he was a pretty humble guy when I first got to know him, and he worked in the oil and gas industry, and he actually worked with a venture that went forward in Wyoming that was with the McMurray oil company, and he was the head field guy. So he went out and made sure that everything was taken care of in the field. Well, what happened was they got extremely lucky, and they found the largest gas-producing field in the continental United States for a while. So what happened was they monetized that and sold it. And they sold it for, I don't know, some say high 9 figures, some say it went into the 10 figures. Anyway, he had an opportunity to buy a small piece or portion of that, and then he also had overriding royalties from the production that came along. And this guy his name was Joe Scott, and Joe Scott basically in a matter of 2 or 3 years went from an uneducated, he barely finished high school, bounced around, struggled with life, didn't have a formal education at all, just a hard worker. Went from that to Jed's a millionaire kind of thing. I mean, it is a, Beverly Hillbilly type of a scenario, but nonetheless, he is all of a sudden is worth many, many millions of dollars. And so I was representing him when he was a field guy. And so I didn't charge him very much because he didn't have a lot of money to pay. And so we had a relationship. He made a lot of money, and so then what he wanted to do was do it again and see what he could do. So he and another fellow from that project decided that they wanted to get into the water treatment business. And there was a big discovery and technology that was going on in Wyoming, and it involves coal bed methane production. And what had to happen in order to have coal bed methane production, you had to produce water out of the coal seams. Once you produced the water, then that freed up the pressures that held the gas in place. You got rid of the water and the gas followed. And it was new technology. About 15, 16 years ago was when they first started figuring this whole technology out. Well, what happened is you're now going to have to produce literally oceans of water in order to get the gas. And the water had different qualities. Some of it was pretty decent water, and others was pretty contaminated. So what they were doing was focusing on the contaminated waters and how to treat those. And they went for probably a year or so looking for different technologies. Ultimately, found a technology. In the meantime, they were using me, and so I set up their business entity, and I was giving them advice with regard to how to structure things, because it was Joe without any formal education and an engineer. And he didn't have any real people skills or people organization opportunity. So they got together and they went along. Bingo. They tapped into the technology they used on the Manhattan Project. And the Manhattan Project was when they were doing the nuclear bomb in World War II. Basically, it was uranium, produced heavy water, and then you had to treat the heavy water. And so this guy named Higgins came up with this technology, and it was a countercurrent ion exchange technology. Not important. What was important, it worked for CBM water treatment. So they launch that, and guess what? People use it. And the company starts growing. And so they had to get a license on that, and so I negotiated the license for them. We had to have some other joint venture negotiations. I took care of all that. The company grew. and it grew, and it grew. And the engineer who was running it for Joe, it outgrew him. And so there were some problems. And as it grew, it was kind of interesting. When the two guys went into this, Joe and his partner, the engineer, everything was really good. And the further it went, and the more it grew, and the more it got a little bit out of control, the more they started having problems. So, ultimately, after it had been up for about 2.5 years and it was growing like a weed, they came to me, not the engineer, but Joe came with another partner, and they said, hey, we have a problem. We're about ready to lose our company. We know that you practice law, but would you consider shutting down your practice and going and becoming the CEO and running the company? And oh, by the way, we'll let you buy into some equity in this thing. And so I took the offer, went home, talked to my wife. She said, what? I said, really? She said, really? And I said, yeah, let's do it. And she said, okay, go ahead. So it ended up, I went up, and the location of it was in Sheridan, Wyoming. And I bought into the company, but that was a no-brainer because I knew what was happening, and I had been involved from the get-go. And the charge that the two guys gave me, the two partners, was, Bob, go up there, make the company worth more, increase the value, and sell it. So I shut down my practice. I go up. I've been an attorney. I haven't been in the business world, so, needless to say, my wife's concern probably well-founded, but nonetheless, I knew that this was a winner, absolutely a winner, so I did it. Shut down my practice, headed to Sheridan, and took the project on. Dan, it's time for a break. The guys have got sugar in their systems. It's time to take a break. What are some of the characteristics that person has? Take another 10 seconds. Okay? Got that? Now, I want you to think about somebody that you don't trust. Do not trust. Do the same thing. What are the characteristics that create that reason, or the reasons that you don't trust that individual? Okay, got it? All right. First, the person that you trust. Throw out, what are characteristics that make you want to trust that individual? Unselfish.
See them sacrifice for my benefit.
Sacrifice for your benefit. Okay, great. Others, go.
In a position of responsibility.
Position of responsibility. Uh-huh.
Like worked hard for success, so knows the value of success.
Okay, worked hard for success, knows the value thereof.
Dependable.
Dependable. Good. Go.
Committed.
Committed. Perfect. Others? Go.
Sincere.
Sincere. Okay, back there.
I know them well.
Know them well. Good. Honest. Excellent. Okay. Now, characteristics of that person that you don't trust. What?
Ulterior motives.
Ulterior motives.
Really disorganized.
Disorganized. Go.
Self-centered.
Self-centered. Mm-hmm.
Lazy.
Lazy. Okay. Lazy. Interesting. But true. Good point. Others.
Have a poor track record.
Poor track record, poor history. Okay. Now think about that. Okay, you've got a person that you trust, and you've got a person that you've identified that you don't trust. Which one of those guys would you want to go into business with or do a project with? Is it obvious? The person you trust. What about the person that you don't trust? If you went into business with them, how would you conduct your affairs? What would you be doing? Playing defense. And playing defense would mean that you would, if you agreed to something, you'd always have it on paper. Go ahead.
You'd always be overseeing what they would do, so you wouldn't be able to do your
Okay. Exactly. You'd be watching what they're doing, and you wouldn't be able to focus on what you should be doing. Okay? Good. Other observations about going into business with that person that you don't trust?
Like the example, each of you would be trying to figure out when to close your fist figure to leave before the other person can.
Exactly. Yeah, you'd be trying to figure out when that guy was going to take you to the cleaners, you know. So, realistically, future, would there be a long-term future that you would expect with that individual? Yeah, I don't think so. Really, if you think about any kind of a venture that you go forward, then trust is a critical element, is it? Is it not? It's going to be a critical element with regard to the success you have, whether it's going to work out, the whole venture, and what long-term is going to be. Also, efficiencies are going to go down, correct? And think about just starting a new business like Michael Scott was talking about. Okay, if you've got that situation where you don't trust your partner and you're moving forward, what are your chances of success? Very small, because you're not going to probably have a lot of capital, and so consequently, and I submit to you that trust in the early stages of a venture is equal to capital. Because if you can generate trust, you're going to get people to buy in. If they trust your idea, they're going to buy in, either with contribution of resources, talent, or money. And ultimately, to be successful in a new venture, you've got to build and focus on that trust. Trust is a critical element. No question. I mean, it maybe is more critical than money itself in those early stages, and as the business matures. So, let's get back to what I was doing. Okay, I get drafted into the world of entrepreneurs, and I go to become a CEO, and I go up. Sheridan's 150, 160 miles away from where I live, so I travel up there to find out what in the heck, what are they talking about when they say they're going to lose their business. Joe Scott and his partner, and then not hearing it from the engineer who was running the company. So the engineer that was running it has now resigned and is out of the business. I go up for the first meeting, and lo and behold, I find out what's going on. That company had lost any and all trust that had existed in the early stages. And in fact, the people were somewhat paralyzed with regard to moving forward. They would stay in their office. There were groups that were forming that were concerned about their livelihood, their jobs. So a bunch of them were about ready to spin off and go get other jobs and leave the company technically in a void. It was really, really paralyzingly bad with regard to the trust that had been created by the engineer. And what had happened was the engineer didn't trust the employees. So he would tell them what to do. He wouldn't listen to them. He wouldn't let them participate. He didn't show trust in them, their abilities, or what was happening. Then he would make some statements that he wouldn't follow through on. And so that he had basically lied to him on 3 or 4 fronts. And so there was this culture of lack of trust. And I mean, I'm walking into it, and what do you do? What do you do in that setting? I mean, I was confounded. I thought I was going to come in and shore up some elements of the business, maybe cut some costs, do the standard business type of moves. Not the case. I was confronted with a lack of confidence, a lack of trust. And so I wasn't sure really what to do. Honestly, didn't know what to do. Lucked onto something. There was a guy there. There was a guy named Fred. And when I first got there, probably a day or two in, I called the engineers in and I said, hey, what can we do to shore up this company? What can we do to make it more valuable? And so they were talking, and one guy in charge of quality and control and engineering, he was kind of a interesting kind of guy, black and white, real engineering kind of this is how it happens. Not a lot of personality, probably had 50 merit badges, I mean, just really straightforward. Anyway, so we're talking, and he says, you know what I think you ought to do? I said, what? Don't know anything. He says, fire Fred. And I said, fire Fred, huh? I said, who's Fred? He said, well, he doesn't do anything. I said, okay. Well, where's Fred? And I said, well, we tried him in this job, and we tried him in this job. They tried him in a couple of technical jobs, and he just couldn't cut it. And the engineer said, he's really slow. I don't think he'll ever be able to do anything in this organization. He just isn't very bright. Nice guy, but there's no job for him here. So I've got him assigned to the warehouse, and he sweeps the warehouse. I said, oh, okay, well, it's good advice. I'll see what happens with regard to that. Let me get my feet on the ground a little further, and I'll find out. So anyway, never met Fred, for the next 3 or 4 days. I kept thinking I needed to get over to the warehouse and find out what Fred didn't do, but didn't have a chance. Went home that weekend, came back up, and it was in the wintertime. Starts snowing. So it's really snowing, and I'm not sleeping very well because I don't know what to do with regard to this company that I've got, and I'm trying to save it and make it more valuable. So I get up about 5 o'clock in the morning, and I can't sleep, so I go to the office. Figure, there's still a lot I got to learn about this company. And I got to the office, and there was this guy that was clearing the walks. 5 o'clock in the morning. I figured, I don't even know, what maintenance we have or anything like that. So I just, see the guy and go in and start working. And throughout the day, this guy keeps working. So I said, man, that's got to be cold out there, because we get about a foot of snow that day, and he keeps working. I said, who is that? He said, that's Fred. I said, really? Fred, huh? So I had Fred come in. I said, Fred, you were here at 5 o'clock in the morning. Why? And he said, well, because it snowed. And somebody had to clear the walks, and I don't think anybody knows, that they're supposed to do that, so I did it. I said, oh, God, that's great. He said, I got an idea. I said, Fred, what would it take to improve on this snow removal? And really, Fred is not the brightest thing on 2 legs. I mean, I will tell you, the engineer wasn't half wrong. But you know what? He had a good work ethic. And so he tells Fred says, well, I brought my shovel from home. If you bought me a better shovel, I bet I could do it better. And I said, gee, yeah. No, Fred, let's look beyond that. he said, well, I don't think you can afford it, but you could get a snowblower. That would work better. I said, really? Is that the best? He said, well, yeah, other than, I guess, getting a tractor with a blade on it, little tractor. He said, but if I got that, I could do the parking lot and everything. So I said, Fred, I want you to go out and I want you to price some tractors for me and get back to me and find out what's going on. So anyway, Fred went out and did that. And he came back and had some numbers. Meantime, I told the engineers that I had Fred on this project. And guess what? My favorite guy, and he's not a bad guy. I mean, he really wasn't. The engineer said, oh boy, he won't get that done. Well, Fred comes back and he's got 5 different bids. And so I said, Fred, which one do you like? He was reluctant to tell me because it was one of the middle ones. It wasn't the cheapest because he didn't think that would work very well. It wasn't the most expensive. It was in the middle, and he thought I would want the cheapest one. And I said, Fred, no, go buy it. So Fred went and bought the tractor. Little tractor, kind of cute, kind of green, had a blade on it. And Fred was in seventh heaven, and we had the most snow we'd ever had in the wintertime. But I found out something. Fred had a good work ethic, and Fred couldn't handle, complicated things, but he could handle mundane tasks. One of the things that we had to do that was a mundane task was test the water. And we needed to do it regularly, and we could do it as much as we wanted during a month, but you had to do it at least once. Testing the water gave us the qualities of water, and we could adjust our price according to what the quality of the water was. The engineers, it was below them because all you had to do was go to the different sites and pull the water and then make sure it got into the lab. Well, the engineers were doing far more important things than doing simple tasks of taking the samples. So samples were getting taken once a month, and then they were sent in. It occurred to me that if we were going to change pricing, maybe if we took samples and we could change on a day notice, that it would make a difference. So I said, how about if we have Fred take the samples? Engineer, now he's seeing Fred do he's starting to get, and he says, yeah, I think Fred could handle taking a bottle of water, getting some water, sealing it, and taking it to the lab. He said that would probably work out. So, with Fred having new assignment, he started taking samples, and we started taking samples with Fred, he was real aggressive. And actually, we had to back him off to just a week because he would take samples every day. And it cost a little bit of money to get the samples run, but nonetheless, there was a trade-off. Well, guess what happened? We found out that we were undercharging because of the quality fluctuations in the quality of the water. We found out that we were undercharging about, between a half a cent and a cent per barrel of water. But we were treating so much water that translated into roughly $3,000 a day. All right? $3,000 a day that now we started being able to bill because Fred, who was not capable of doing anything, was now taking samples. $3,000, that's $1 million a year. We sold the company at a 10 times EBITDA. Fred made us $10 million on the sale. What beyond that happened was the employees saw that I really cared. And I told him that I trusted him, and I trusted Fred to buy a tractor. And I trusted Fred to get the samples. And the other employees saw that, and so the culture started turning because of what Fred was doing and the respect that was being shown to Fred. And ultimately, we turned the culture around with regard to the company, and were successful with regard to doing that. Now, Dan, got the slide? Economics of trust. So we're talking about trust. Simply, if trust goes down, your efficiency or speed in a company goes down and your costs go up. Conversely, if trust goes up and you have trust in your employees and they trust each other and trust in the company, speed goes up and costs go down. If I could give you another example of what happened at EMIT real quick. We had a situation where we had this technology, and in the state of Wyoming, the DEQ requires construction permits. And so you can get a construction permit, and you have to have one before you can treat water. So our competitors, or people that were coming in, had to have construction permit just like we did. So we started out, and we would get a construction permit, and we worked with the DEQ, and we got another one, and we worked with DEQ, and we got another one. Ultimately, the DEQ said, you know, you guys are doing a lot of work. We keep running this paper through, and we figured out, we trust that your system works. And it's within the parameters of what we would expect. So, you know what we're going to do? We're going to make an exception for you. We're going to give you a statewide construction permit that is, we'll take a look at it once a year. And you guys, if you submit it, us, EMIT, the company, you submit it, we'll do it, and then anybody that comes in and wants a construction permit utilizing your technology, we'll give it to them. Well, the process usually runs 3, 4, 5 months to get this construction permit on an individual basis. But if you used our process and walked into the DEQ, you could have your permit overnight. Construction permits, generally, when we would do it on a statewide basis and do it for that, it was in the neighborhood of probably $50,000. So, because we worked very hard in establishing a trust relationship with the DEQ, and the DEQ trusted our process, we were able to create trust. Speed, overnight, cost, down. And, needless to say, the DEQ kept saying, well, we can't recommend anybody, but you'll need a construction permit, and if you want it quickly, you will want to go to these guys because we can turn it over, like I said, literally overnight. Helped the business grow and gave us an opportunity to have a competitive edge because of creating that trust mechanism between the DEQ and what we were doing. Let's see. Another situation dealing with trust and creating a trust mechanism. We had a company that we were treating water for, and they were right on the border of Wyoming and Montana, northern border. Wyoming was really pretty aggressive about allowing treatment of water. Montana was real reluctant to go ahead, and the governor of the state of Montana was reluctant to allow it to occur. So what was happening was, in these border communities, Wyoming was flourishing because they were allowing business to go forward, and the regulation wasn't so strict that they could go ahead and allow treatment, versus Montana, where they weren't allowing treatment to occur because of the regulation that had been put in place by the governor. So what happened was the governor was getting some pressure. So the governor set up a tour, and he was going to go and he was going to look at these different facilities, and our facility was one that he was, going to make a tour on. And the company we were working with was Fidelity, and that company had a facility, like I said, that we had been treating water for about 6 months, and we'd been doing the job. The regional vice president, or the guy in charge of that whole area, the Rocky Mountain region, was asked by the governor to go on this tour and take them around to the tour. And he said, I want you to go to this Fidelity site where we had our facility. And so I was invited to go on the tour. And again, I am a lawyer who put together some agreements, but now I've got 4 or 5 months under me, and I at least know the buzzwords. But I've really trusted in our engineers to take care of things. So I went along, because I had a CEO behind my name, and you were looking for credibility, I guess, for lack of anything else. Went along, we toured, and it became rather apparent early on that the governor of Montana did not like the idea of treatment. And so he was looking for reasons it didn't work. And we went through the whole process, and at the end, we were in this little group, and he had his little staff guys, and they were taking notes on why it shouldn't work. And the governor asked the regional vice president of Fidelity, he said, now tell me, this guy's Mr. Williams, his last name was Williams. He said, tell me, Mr. Williams, does treatment work? And, I'm kind of like, I don't know, what's he going to say? Because this is kind of a fish or cut bait kind of a deal. And anyway, Williams, it's like he was an ambassador for us. He looks down and he looks up at the governor and he says, Governor Switzer, there are a lot of science projects out there, and there are a lot of guys that will tell you that they can treat water and they can't. And he said, we've even funded a few of those projects ourselves. And he said, up till about 6 months ago, I would have told you that treatment was not to this stage that you could use it reliably. He said, but I can't say that anymore. These guys treat water. You can trust them to do what they say. And Montana still didn't let us treat water, but it made me feel good that we had created this trust. The important thing that I wanted to leave you with today is that trust in a business is critical. And I want you to have this last piece of gem from Michael and Dwight.
What is the most inspiring thing I ever said to you?
Don't be an idiot. Changed my life.
Whenever I'm about to do something, I think, would an idiot do that? And if they would, I do not do that thing.
Don't be an idiot, and my advice, build trust, not barriers. Thank you.